They messed with the wrong guy when they thought they could outsmart me. Let me take you through the wild tale of how a group of HOA bureaucrats turned my quiet country life into a chaotic mess, and how I flipped their scheme into a cash-generating masterpiece. Picture this. They built a fence that cut off the only road to my ranch. Big mistake. They clearly never heard the old saying, "Don't mess with a Texas landowner." Now, I'm sitting here, counting stacks of cash from my DIY toll booth, while the HOA president is scrambling to explain why their budget's gone up in smoke. Where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below if you've ever had a good run-in with an HOA. I bet your stories can't top the madness I'm about to unpack. I'm Caleb Hayes, a 40-year-old remote data analyst with a lifelong obsession for tinkering in tech. 3 years back, I bought a 25-acre spread just outside San Antonio, Texas, chasing my dream of living off the grid. The place was a fixer-upper, overrun pastures, a creaky old farmhouse that looked like it was one storm away from collapsing, and a barn that swayed in the wind. But where others saw a wreck, I saw opportunity. The soil was rich, the water supply was reliable, and it was just far enough from the city to feel like freedom, but close enough for a quick supply run. I've been hooked on building and inventing since I was a kid. Back in grade school, I'd tear apart old radios and gadgets, piecing them back together, sometimes better, sometimes with a few sparks and a lecture from my folks about not burning the house down. Over the years, I taught myself coding and circuitry, skills that became my secret weapon for turning my ranch into a high-tech homestead. My first big win was a smart irrigation setup that used real-time weather feeds and soil sensors to water my crops just right, saving resources and producing a killer harvest that first year. Then I built a solar-powered hen house with doors that slid open at dawn and locked tight at dusk to keep coyotes at bay. I even rigged a system that pings my phone when my sheep are about to lamb, using motion trackers to detect their behavior. My farm was my haven, a vibrant canvas where I cultivated crops, tended to ducks and sheep, and tinkered with tech to streamline rural life. On weekends, neighbors from nearby towns would swing by to grab fresh eggs, veggies, or homemade jams. I even leased out a corner of the land for cozy gatherings or overnight camping under the stars. The dirt road to my property, etched into the landscape for over 6 decades, cut through a small patch overseen by the Silver Pines Homeowners Association. Their upscale neighborhood, with its tidy hedges and matching lampposts, sat a mile down the road. I wasn't part of their HOA, but I held a rock-solid easement from the farm's prior owner, guaranteeing my legal right to use that road, no matter who managed the surrounding land. For 3 years, everything ran smoothly. I built warm ties with most neighbors, especially Clara and Tom Whitaker, a retired couple next door who'd been there for decades. Clara would trade her legendary peach cobbler for my farm-fresh eggs, while Tom, a former mechanic, lent his expertise to my DIY irrigation projects. We had a rhythm, a quiet harmony. That is, until a crisp Wednesday morning when a certified letter landed in my mailbox. I just finished rigging a solar-powered water pump and was dusted in soil when I spotted the stark white envelope amid the usual junk mail. Its formal tone and letterhead from the Silver Pines, HOA, stood out like a sore thumb. The letter announced an emergency HOA meeting at the Silver Pines clubhouse, hinting at unauthorized road access concerns and community safety upgrades up for a vote. The wording was murky, layered with bureaucratic fluff that seemed designed to confuse. As a non-member with a clear legal right to the road, I was puzzled but uneasy. Something felt off. I reread the notice, my gut telling me to show up and clear the air. I had no idea this meeting would spark a 7-month clash, one that would leave only one side standing. The day of the meeting brought a rare autumn downpour. Rain hammered my old pickup as I navigated the very road now under scrutiny. The irony wasn't lost on me. My legal right to this route was about to be challenged in ways I never imagined. The debate was already simmering when I pulled my dusty flatbed truck into the community center lot, wedging it between a pair of gleaming high-end SUVs. I felt like an outsider before I even stepped out. My scuffed boots tracked faint mud across the pristine tile floor as I entered, drawing sharp looks from a few impeccably dressed locals. On Thursday night, I stepped into the community center's meeting room, where about 24 residents sat in tidy rows of metal chairs. A few faces were familiar, including Claring Wynn, who shot me a wary glance from across the room. At the front stood a man I didn't recognize, his tailored blazer and polished loafers screaming money. His dark hair, streaked with silver, was swept back flawlessly, and his smile, too smooth, too calculated, reminded me of a TV evangelist. He introduced himself as Victor Grayson, the new HOA president, fresh from a high-flying finance career in Austin, his voice dripping with self-assurance. Next to him was Ellen Carver, the HOA manager, her lips pressed into a familiar grimace. She gripped a tablet like it held the nuclear codes, her eyes narrowing as they landed on me. Victor launched into the meeting, rattling off routine updates, new sprinkler systems, the spring festival, a repaved walking trail, before pivoting to what he called the access road issue. His breezy tone, as if my livelihood were just another checkbox, set my teeth on edge. Clara fidgeted in her seat, her hands twisting in her lap. As many of you are aware, Victor said, loosening his silk tie with a flourish, we're moving forward with Crestview Heights, an elite development bordering our community. This project will boost property values by at least 25%. He clicked a remote, and the wall lit up with glossy images of sprawling mansions, each with manicured lawns and infinity pools. Phase 1 includes 10 luxury homes, starting at $1.5 million, plus a members-only fitness center and golf course. Murmurs of approval spread through the room, but my stomach churned. There's just one hurdle, Victor continued, his voice taking on a theatrical edge. The outdated farmstead clogging up our community's main thoroughfare. My farm. He spat the word farmstead like it was a synonym for landfill. The screen flashed to a rendering of an ornate iron gate, flanked by ivy-covered pillars and a high-tech security system. This entrance will elevate our aesthetic and restrict unwanted traffic, he said, his eyes briefly flicking my way. My pulse hammered. That unwanted traffic was me, my workers, my life. The gate wasn't just a barrier, it was a message. Construction on the new gate is set to start tomorrow and will likely wrap up in just a few days. I couldn't hold back anymore. My chair screeched across the hardwood floor as I shot to my feet, pulling every pair of eyes in the room toward me. "Pardon me," I said, struggling to keep my voice calm despite the fury bubbling inside. "I'm Ethan Caldwell, the owner of the so-called eyesore ranch you're talking about. I have a legal easement guaranteeing access to my property through that road. You can't just block a protected right-of-way without so much as a conversation." The room went quiet. Maxwell's face flickered with surprise before settling into a smug sneer. He clearly hadn't expected me to be here, let alone speak out. But he recovered fast, flashing a patronizing grin that made my fists clench. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, his tone dripping with false civility, "while you may have had some handshake deal in the past, the HOA has full control over community roads and safety measures." His voice carried the weight of someone who thought the matter was already decided. "Frankly, your farm is dragging down the aesthetic of our neighborhood and hurting property values. The board has unanimously approved the gate installation." He nodded toward a row of self-satisfied board members in the front, their heads bobbing in agreement. "Of course, we're reasonable. You can purchase an access pass for a modest annual fee of $350. A small price to pay for the enhanced security and property value boost we're delivering." My blood boiled. "This isn't some informal deal," I snapped, locking eyes with him. "It's a recorded easement, filed with the county, a legal right you can't just erase with a vote." I scanned the room, meeting the gazes of other residents. "My ranch has been there for generations, long before your manicured lawns and cul-de-sacs. The previous owners never had an issue with this community, and neither did I, until now." Maxwell's smile didn't budge, but his eyes turned cold. "Times change, Mr. Caldwell," he said smoothly. "The board decision is final. Construction begins tomorrow. I suggest you apply for your access pass soon to avoid any trouble." With that, he pivoted to the next agenda item, dismissing me like I was nothing. After the meeting, I lingered in the parking lot, my anger still simmering. The rain had cleared, but water dripped from the overhanging branches, mirroring my sour mood. Harold Grayson, a longtime resident I'd seen at past community gatherings, approached cautiously. He was in his late 60s, with warm eyes and a forehead creased with worry. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, he lowered his voice. Bennett's been cozying up to investors, promising to jack up property values by modernizing the area and getting rid of undesirable properties, like your ranch, he confided. This gate nonsense is just the start. He's got his sights set on your land for his big development plans. The first hint of trouble came when Victor's voice dipped to a conspiratorial murmur. They're trying to force you to sell. He leaned closer, his words heavy with experience. I've seen this playbook before in other neighborhoods. First, they'll slap you with access limits. Then, vague zoning infractions pop up. Next, you'll have utility issues, water, power, you name it. They'll grind you down until you cave and sign. I thanked Victor for the heads up, a cold knot forming in my stomach. When I pressed Maxwell, the HOA president, for proof of my property's easement rights, he brushed me off. Those records are being audited, he said, his tone clipped. We're reassessing all legacy easements due to updated community regulations. Legal's on it. We'll get it resolved eventually. His words dripped with delay tactics, and I knew he was stalling while his agenda churned forward. Driving home that evening, my SUV's headlights slicing through the rural dark, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that I was up against forces with deeper pockets and sharper claws than I could match. That night, I dialed my old college friend, Sarah Lynn, a property lawyer based nearby. Despite the late hour, she answered on the second ring. I paced my living room as I spilled the details, pausing now and then to glance out the window, half expecting to spot construction crews already moving in. Sarah listened intently, interrupting only to clarify a point or two. When I finished, she let out a sharp exhale. Noah, these HOA sharks play dirty, but a recorded easement isn't something they can just wish away. Property law doesn't bend that easily. I heard her typing rapidly in the background, likely digging into legal databases. Tomorrow, head to the county clerk's office and pull a certified copy of your easement. If it's on file, they can't legally cut off your access. But brace yourself. This fight could drag on for months and rack up serious legal bills. Her advice wasn't exactly reassuring, but it gave me a starting point. What about tomorrow? I asked, my voice tight with worry. They're breaking ground in the morning. Can we stop them? Sarah sighed. An emergency injunction isn't quick, Noah. It could take days, maybe weeks, depending on the court's backlog. For now, document everything. Snap photos, record conversations, save every email and letter. If they physically block your access, that's potentially unlawful restraint on your property. Call the sheriff immediately. We strategized for another 40 minutes, mapping out next steps. By the time we hung up, it was well past midnight. Before turning in, I grabbed a flashlight and trudged down my gravel driveway to the main road. Sure enough, there were signs of their plans. Neon yellow stakes and spray-painted markers lining the roadside, with fluorescent flags signaling where the new fence and gate would rise. They weren't wasting any time. For months, I'd been mulling over how to tackle the looming legal dispute. I barely slept, tossing and turning, convinced I had a few days left to sort out. But the next morning, the low rumble of heavy equipment jolted me awake. The situation had spiraled overnight. The sharp, repetitive blare of construction trucks reversing pierced the quiet just before sunrise. I scrambled into clothes, half stumbling as I yanked on my shoes and bolted outside. From my front steps, I froze, staring in shock as a crew hoisted a 10-foot steel barrier across my only access road, complete with a high-tech gate. The barricade stretched far in both directions, severing my land from the highway. A massive backhoe clawed at the earth, digging holes for posts, while workers mixed cement to anchor the gate's base. I stormed over, heart pounding, and demanded to speak to the person in charge. The crew barely looked up. "Just following orders, sir," one said, adjusting his hard hat and avoiding my gaze. "You'll need to take it up with the HOA office." Within an hour, Victor showed up, trailed by his assistant, Elaine. Both were dressed impeccably, as if they just stepped out of a boardroom despite the early hour and the dusty site. Victor flashed a document he called a permit, holding it just out of my reach with a smug grin. "This is HOA land, Mr. Carter," he said, his voice dripping with false politeness. "You'll need to sign up for a gate pass, $2, $500 a year for access to our private road. Elaine can handle your application, though it'll take about a week to process." He smirked, adding, "We're generous, so I've approved a temporary pass for you." "We're not heartless." I was furious, my hands balled into fists. "This is outrageous. I have a legal easement. You can't cut off my only way in and out." Victor's smile didn't waver, but his eyes turned icy. "Mr. Carter, I get that you're frustrated, but this is a fully permitted project. I'd hate for you to cause a scene and force us to involve the authorities." He nodded to Elaine. "Miss Harper, give Mr. Carter his temporary pass. I have other matters to attend to." With that, he strode back to his sleek black sedan. Elaine, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else, handed me a flimsy plastic card with obvious hesitation, as if parting with it pained her. "This is good for 7 days," she muttered. "Payment is due in full for the annual fee before we issue a permanent card. No installments," she snapped, her voice sharp as if daring me to argue. Her eyes gleamed with anticipation of a confrontation. With no real options, I grabbed a temporary card and stormed back to my truck. The gate, now fully functional, demanded a swipe just to leave my own land. The sting of frustration and humiliation burned as I drove off. I headed straight for the county records office, a 25-minute drive to the courthouse in the heart of town. There, a clerk with silver hair and glasses dangling from a beaded chain helped me dig up a certified copy of my easement. She scanned the document, her brow arching. "This is a clear perpetual easement, in place since '72. Odd that anyone's challenging it," she remarked. Holding the paper felt like grasping a small victory, but I still wasn't sure what came next. Next stop was Olivia's law office, tucked into a sleek building on the outskirts of downtown. Her assistant ushered me in without delay. Olivia sat amid stacks of legal texts, her computer screen glowing with open case law tabs. After examining my easement, she leaned back, slipping off her glasses. "This is ironclad," she said confidently. "They can't block your access legally. It's a perpetual easement tied to the land itself, not the owners." She leaned forward, her tone turning grave. "But here's the catch. An emergency injunction could take weeks to get through the courts. They're swamped. This is a stalling tactic. They're betting you'll cave before the system catches up." Olivia laid out the plan. "File for the injunction, but expect a 3-week wait for a hearing. Document everything," she urged. "Photos, recordings if they're legal, a detailed log. If they cut off your access completely, even for a day, call the sheriff and cite your easement rights." I left her office with a strategy, but felt like I was playing catch-up in a game I didn't sign up for. Back at my property that afternoon, the transformation was stark. A towering metal gate now blocked the access road, flanked by cameras and an intercom system. A sturdy fence stretched endlessly in both directions, a bold statement of Maxwell's control. He stood there, smirking, and handed me a temporary access card good for 7 days. After that, he said coolly, "You'll need to pay the fee or find a different route home," he said with a smirk, leaning closer through the car window. "And don't bother digging through those legal papers. By the time you file anything, our project will be locked in, and we'll have ways to make your life complicated." His smug grin lingered as I gripped the temporary access card he'd handed me. I drove past the shiny new gate onto my land, my mind already racing. If they thought they could turn my road into their personal tollway, maybe I could play their game on my terms. I didn't say a word to Carson, the HOA's slick representative. Instead, I parked my SUV near the edge of my property and started pacing the boundary line. The new fence they'd put up didn't look right. It veered slightly, cutting into what I was pretty sure was my land. I dug out the old survey map from when I bought the place 5 years ago, spreading it across my kitchen table. Comparing the map to the landscape, I noticed a discrepancy, a subtle curve where the fence met the gate. Something was off. For the next few days, I buried myself in research. My dining room became a war room of property deeds, Texas land laws, and easement regulations. Coffee cups piled up as I pored over statutes and survey notes. Then I found it. The HOA's gate wasn't just on their land. A sliver of it, about 2 feet of the gate's foundation and a single support post, crossed onto my property. A tiny mistake, but a game changer. My easement guaranteed me access, sure, but this encroachment? That was leverage. I called up Sarah, a friend and local attorney who specialized in property disputes. If there are gates on your land, even by a couple of feet, it's an unauthorized structure, she said, her tone sharp with excitement. You've got rights they can't ignore. She advised me to get a professional survey to confirm the boundaries before moving forward. If you're right, this could shift the whole fight in your favor. But we need to be airtight. I reached out to Jake, a surveyor I'd worked with when I built my workshop. Jake was a no-frills guy who didn't trust bureaucrats or their fancy gates. After walking the property with me and double-checking the maps, he nodded, pulling a pencil from behind his ear. Yup, they screwed up. That gate's base is on your side. But they thought you wouldn't catch it. With Jake's confirmation, an idea took shape. If the HOA wanted to control access with their gate, I'd build my own, right on my property, next to their precious setup. I'd spent years tinkering with circuits and automation systems as a hobby. A custom toll booth? I could make that work. Jake grinned when I told him the plan. Give them a taste of their own medicine, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I'll help you set it up. Strike fast before they catch on, Ethan urged. Once they figure out our plan, they'll try to shut us down. Better to act now and deal with the fallout later. Ethan and I spent the entire weekend strategizing and collecting supplies, knowing we had to move swiftly while the HOA office was shuttered. We hit up hardware stores, tech shops, and lumber yards, amassing everything we'd need for the job. Maxwell thinks he's got us beat, I told Ethan as we pored over our schematics. But this weekend, he'll learn not to mess with a rancher who knows his way around a toolbox and has a point to prove. On Saturday night, we got to work. Ethan brought along 2 of his most reliable crew members, and I roped in a friend who's a wizard with wiring. Under the glow of work lights, we labored through the night, the hum of drills and saws occasionally catching the attention of late-night drivers. Luckily, Maxwell and his wife, Patricia, were nowhere to be seen, probably smug in the belief they'd already won. By Sunday morning, we'd built a sleek, professional-grade toll booth right next to the HOA's entrance gate, entirely on my land. The structure was compact but solid, with a shaded operator's station, a mechanical barrier arm, and bold signage. I wired up the electronics myself. Security cameras, a payment processor, and an automated gate that lifted once payment cleared. We put up polished signs that read, Private Road Access, $25 per crossing or $120 monthly pass. Cash, card, or mobile payments accepted. I called in a favor at a local print shop, and the owner, who'd had his own run-ins with the HOA, was thrilled to rush the job. We even installed solar panels and a backup battery to keep the booth running, no matter what tricks the HOA might pull. By Sunday afternoon, as residents returned from their weekend getaways, our toll booth caused a stir. Cars lined up, drivers squinting at the setup in confusion. Dressed in a crisp polo and a branded cap, I stood by the booth, calmly addressing each vehicle. This road crosses my property here, I explained to a baffled couple in an SUV. Since the HOA's charging for access on their side, I'm doing the same for my land. It's $25 per trip or $120 for a monthly pass. Your choice. Some residents grumbled, a few laughed it off, but most paid up to get home. A handful tried to argue or threatened to call the cops, but I just nodded toward the property line survey posted prominently on the booth. Go right ahead, I said with a smile. I've already cleared this with the sheriff's office. This is my land, and I'm well within my rights. By late afternoon, the neighborhood was buzzing. Phones came out, photos were snapped, and word of our rogue toll booth spread like wildfire. It was only a matter of time before Ethan caught wind of the toll booth. Sure enough, around 3:30 p.m., Clara stumbled upon it while driving back from the farmer's market. Her jaw dropped as she slowed her SUV to a stop, rolling down the window with a look of utter disbelief. "What is this nonsense?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice through the afternoon heat. "This is outrageous. I'm not paying a dime, and I'm calling Ethan right now." She pulled her car to the shoulder, engine still running, and furiously tapped her phone. Half an hour later, Ethan roared up in his sleek sedan, his polished loafers scuffing the gravel as he marched toward the booth. His face was a storm cloud, flushed with fury. "What in God's name is going on here?" he bellowed, drawing the curious stares of a few neighbors lingering nearby. "This is a public road. You can't just set up a toll booth like some highway bandit." I leaned against the booth, unfazed, which only seemed to stoke his anger. "With all due respect, Mr. Carver," I said evenly, "this isn't a public road. You made that clear when you installed your fancy gate last year. According to my property survey, this stretch of pavement sits squarely on my land. I'm just doing what you've done with the HOA, controlling access to my property." Ethan's eyes narrowed, his voice climbing to a near shriek. "This is harassment. It's illegal. I'm calling the cops." I shrugged, gesturing to the open road. "Go right ahead. I'm standing on my own property, and I've got the certified survey to prove it. Spoke to a lawyer, too. Everything's above board. If you've got questions about the boundary, feel free to order your own survey." True to his word, Ethan yanked out his phone, pacing like a caged lion as he ranted to the dispatcher about an unlawful roadblock in a rogue toll booth. Within 15 minutes, Officer Delgado pulled up, a no-nonsense veteran I'd met once before over a neighbor's stray dog incident. She listened patiently as Ethan gestured wildly, and I calmly presented my side, handing over the property survey and easement documents. After a meticulous review, Officer Delgado turned to Ethan. "Mr. Carver, this looks like a civil dispute, not a criminal one. Based on these documents, Mr. Hayes is within his rights on his own property. If you disagree about the boundary, you'll need to take it up in civil court." Ethan sputtered, his face a shade of red that rivaled the sunset. "This is absurd. There's got to be some law he's breaking." Officer Delgado stayed calm but firm. "Unless you can show this land belongs to you, there's nothing for me to enforce here. I'd recommend consulting your lawyer." As Delgado's patrol car rolled away, Ethan stood there, fuming but powerless. I knew this was far from over. Ethan Carver wasn't the type to back down. By the next morning, word spread that he'd called an urgent HOA meeting to rally his forces. The battle lines were drawn, and this war was just getting started. The whispers around Golden Meadows painted me as a rogue instigator, thanks to Frank Maxwell's dramatic retelling. He branded me a menace, claiming my toll booth was tanking property values and endangering the community's peace. The HOA, eager to flex its muscle, enlisted Richard Hale, a high-priced real estate lawyer with a knack for squashing disputes. Within days, a stern letter arrived on his firm's crisp letterhead, demanding I shut down my operation immediately. It cited a laundry list of supposed infractions, local ordinance violations, easement disputes, and accusations of creating a public nuisance. I passed the letter to my attorney, Emma, who scoffed at it, calling it a hollow scare tactic with no real legal weight. Unfazed, I kept my toll booth running, raking in thousands of dollars in just a few days. The residents of Golden Meadows weren't upset with me. They were fed up with Maxwell for blowing the situation out of proportion instead of finding a solution. Many began grumbling about the absurdity of paying twice, once to me for access and again to the HOA for the privilege of living there. The HOA didn't sit idly by. They tried to sabotage me, first by cutting power to the booth's vicinity. My solar panels and backup battery, however, kept things humming without a hitch. Next, they sent county inspectors to dig up code violations, but my friend Jake had ensured our setup was airtight, exceeding every regulation. They even tried to slap a commercial business label on my toll, requiring special permits, but Emma deftly argued it was merely a property access fee, identical to the HOA's own charges. The dispute became the talk of the town, spreading like wildfire through coffee shops, school drop-off zones, and weekend barbecues. Margaret Tate, a respected resident who'd called Golden Meadows home for over 2 decades, started challenging Maxwell's leadership at HOA meetings. Why are we hemorrhaging money on lawyers when we could just tear down the gate and be done with this? She demanded during a fiery session. This toll booth fiasco is turning us into the county's punchline. My friends are joking about needing cash just to visit. Her words struck a chord, as residents grew increasingly exasperated, shelling out tolls just to reach their own driveways. While I was dealing with the ongoing dispute, Emily Harper, a journalist from the Austin Times, reached out for an interview about what she dubbed the toll feud. I welcomed her to my property, walked her through the stack of legal documents, and laid out my side of the story. I didn't pick this fight, I told her, but if they're going to charge me to cross their land, I'm within my rights to do the same. Emily's article, which exposed the conflict and highlighted Maxwell's aggressive tactics, hit the stands that Sunday. By Monday, it had exploded online, striking a chord with people nationwide who shared their own HOA nightmares. The story caught the attention of local news channels, and soon my modest toll booth turned into a roadside curiosity, with folks stopping by to snap photos and cheer me on. The growing public support and mounting frustration from residents should have nudged Maxwell toward a compromise. Instead, he dug in deeper. One Wednesday, at 3 a.m., my security cameras caught him and 2 others tampering with my toll booth. The footage showed them smashing the payment kiosk, spray-painting the lenses, and trying to rip down the gate arm. One of the men looked suspiciously like Richard Hayes, the HOA's lawyer, though he wore a cap pulled low. The third accomplice's identity remained unclear. I wasted no time reporting the vandalism to the police, handing over the high-definition footage as evidence. What Maxwell didn't know was that I'd installed hidden secondary cameras after the last incident, anticipating sabotage. Those captured his face clearly as he defaced my equipment, oblivious to being recorded. When questioned by the police, Maxwell flat out denied any involvement, claiming the footage was inconclusive and even accusing me of faking the incident for publicity. He didn't realize my system had already backed up the video to the cloud in real time, and I'd shared copies with the authorities, my neighbor Sarah, and a few close allies for safekeeping. With help from my friend Jake, I rebuilt the toll booth in less than 24 hours, this time fortifying it with heavy-duty steel and upgrading the security with motion-activated floodlights and sirens. I also put up a new sign, Maxwell Bennett's special rate, $1,500 per crossing. Then, I posted the vandalism footage on social media, where it spread like wildfire through local forums and community pages, humiliating Maxwell and the HOA board. The HOA scrambled to hold an emergency meeting, where residents voiced their outrage over Maxwell's reckless actions and the board's mismanagement. The pressure was mounting, but Maxwell's next move was anyone's guess. The uproar over the legal risks Maxwell had dragged the Homeowners Association into was palpable. "You've put us all in the crosshairs of a lawsuit," one resident bellowed during the heated HOA meeting, as noted in Clara's summary. Who in their right mind defaces private property on video? As the tension simmered, I dug deeper into Maxwell's motives and history, tapping into public records and my connections in the property sector. What I uncovered was damning. Maxwell wasn't just steering the deal as HOA president. He had a cozy arrangement with Silver Crest Properties, the developers pushing for the Willow Grove project. He stood to pocket hefty personal kickbacks for smoothing over the ranch dispute and paving the way for their plans. This blatant conflict of interest was something he'd conveniently failed to mention to the HOA. Further digging revealed Maxwell had deliberately misled the board about my access rights. He'd pitched the gate installation as a routine security upgrade, glossing over its true purpose, strong-arming me into selling my land. Meanwhile, Clara unearthed documents showing Maxwell had tampered with the original fence permit. The application listed a misleading gate location, carefully sidestepping any reference to my existing easement, which would have triggered scrutiny from the county. I also got my hands on a forwarded email from an HOA member where Maxwell openly bragged about his scheme to choke off my access rights. "Once Carter sees he's cut off from his land, he'll have to sell to us cheap," he wrote. A little disruption now will pay off big when property values soar 25% with a new development. Armed with this evidence, I had Maxwell cornered, but I decided to let him dig himself in deeper before striking. I sent him a formal letter proposing a sit-down at Clara's law firm to negotiate a resolution. To my surprise, he agreed, likely thinking he could bully his way through a formal setting. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday morning. I arrived early, huddling with Clara to fine-tune our approach and double-check our recording setup. Maxwell strolled in 20 minutes late, flanked by his associate, Richard Tate, both decked out in tailored suits that screamed money, probably more than my farm's monthly revenue. At the meeting, I laid out a clear-cut offer. I'd dismantle my makeshift checkpoint and drop all complaints if the HOA removed their gate and cemented my easement rights in a legally binding agreement. It was a straightforward fix, but I could see Maxwell's gears turning, calculating his next move. The standoff ended abruptly. I laid out my terms. Dismantle the dispute, revert to the status quo that had functioned smoothly for years. No toll, no barrier, no mounting legal costs. Across the table, Carter and Ellis traded skeptical looks. Then Carter leaned in, his smirk dripping with arrogance. "Mr. Hayes, you're out of your depth," he said. "The HOA's coffers dwarf your resources. We can bury you in court for a decade if we choose. You'll be drowning in legal bills long before we break a sweat." Carter, brimming with overconfidence, dismissed my proposal outright. He let slip his grand vision for the development, gloating about how he'd outmaneuvered the HOA board. "Half those fools don't even skim the reports I send," he bragged. "They nod along to whatever I say. This project's happening, Hayes, whether you cash out now or get crushed fighting it." What Carter didn't realize was that our exchange was being recorded, perfectly legal under Texas law, with one party's consent. My colleague, Sarah, sat quietly as our witness, and we'd posted a discreet notice about potential recordings in the conference room, a detail Carter and Ellis, in their hubris, had ignored. The next morning, I unleashed the evidence. I shared everything: security footage of the vandalism, incriminating emails, proof of Carter's shady ties to the development firm, and the audio from our meeting. I uploaded it to social media, emailed it to every HOA member, and sent a full dossier to Rachel Torres, a reporter at the Tribune. The fallout was explosive. Torres published a scathing expose, laying bare Carter's financial entanglements with the developer and his deliberate efforts to mislead the HOA. The story gained traction, drawing unwanted attention to Carter and Pinnacle Heights properties. The HOA board scrambled to convene an emergency meeting where furious residents demanded Carter's ouster. The session was a mess. Shouting matches erupted, and questions flew. Carter tried to spin a defense, insisting the recordings were tampered with and the evidence concocted, but his credibility was shot. Ellis, sitting stone-faced beside him, seemed to be mentally drafting his resignation. Within days, Carter was sacked by the HOA, staring down a lawsuit from me and whispers of criminal charges tied to the vandalism. Ellis slipped away as HOA counsel, likely spooked by his own recorded involvement in questionable dealings. The new board, with Laura Bennett stepping in as temporary chair, moved swiftly to clean up the mess. They voted unanimously to tear down the barrier and enshrine my easement rights in a watertight legal agreement. They also agreed to cover the cost of the damages, putting an end to the saga. I turned the tables on Platinum Ridge Developments when they agreed to cover my legal fees as part of settlement. After the controversy surrounding their Golden Meadows Estates project, they pulled out, unwilling to be tied to the negative spotlight. The land earmarked for development was later acquired by a local conservation group and preserved as a protected green space, ensuring the area retained its semi-rural charm. Maxwell, in a last-ditch effort, tried to hit me with a defamation lawsuit, but the court threw it out when he couldn't prove my evidence was false. The vandalism charges against him were resolved through a plea deal that included community service and restitution payments. I took the $15,000 plus collected from the toll booth and funneled it into a land defense fund to support others facing similar HOA intimidation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Maxwell's attempt to strong-arm me ended up creating a resource to combat those same tactics. To celebrate, I threw a massive barbecue at my ranch, inviting all Golden Meadows residents, except Maxwell and the local press. The event turned into a joyful display of community unity, with neighbors expressing gratitude that the toll booth saga was behind us. At the gathering, I unveiled plans to transform my ranch into a community agricultural learning hub, fostering collaboration with those around me. This land was always meant to bring us together, I told the crowd. Instead of division, let's make it a place for shared growth and learning. Frank and Eleanor Hamilton were quick to volunteer for the educational programs. Frank offered to teach kids the basics of electronics, guiding them through building simple circuits and solar-powered devices, while Eleanor led workshops on sustainable gardening. Other neighbors chipped in, sharing their own expertise. Within a year, the ranch had blossomed into a vibrant community center, hosting gardening classes, farmers markets, DIY automation workshops, and weekend events. Local schools started bringing students for field trips, and the university's agricultural extension office partnered with us on research initiatives. Maxwell, meanwhile, was shunned by the community, forced to sell his property and move elsewhere. At the site of the old toll booth, I placed a small plaque, "Don't mess with a rancher who builds and has time to spare." The former gate area was revamped into a welcoming entrance, adorned with wildflowers and a cozy seating nook. The HOA, under pressure, implemented major reforms to ensure fairer practices moving forward. Clarity in governance and curbing unchecked power became my focus when Sarah Thompson joined our council, pushing for fair enforcement of local guidelines. My knack for tinkering found new life as I assisted neighbors in installing wind turbines and smart irrigation systems. I shared a digital handbook on sustainable farming techniques that quickly spread among small-scale growers across the country. The old checkpoint was torn down, but I gave its components new purpose. The gate arm now forms part of a community park's climbing frame. The solar panels power an interactive learning exhibit, and the surveillance cameras track local wildlife for conservation studies. An investigative piece by Mia Carter on our struggle earned her a prestigious reporting award, kickstarting her career in grassroots journalism. This ordeal showed me that united communities outshine self-serving opportunists. Property values in Greenhaven rose, even after the high-end condo project collapsed. Families found living near a thriving educational homestead far more appealing than another generic subdivision. If you're up against your own version of a Maxwell Bennett, here's my advice. Keep detailed records, understand your legal protections, forge strong alliances, and think outside the box. Standing firm, exposing unfairness, and leveraging ingenuity can dismantle bureaucratic overreach. Now, as neighbors drop by for fresh produce or to join our workshops, it's surreal to think this land was once a battleground. The wall meant to divide us has been replaced by open pathways that invite connection. Sometimes, a determined underdog with a bold vision and relentless spirit can prevail over those who confuse wealth with justice and influence with legitimacy.